What do I need to start a food truck in Georgia? You might be asking. If you're looking to create a food truck business, this video is going to give you a handful of permits and licenses you will need. And do you need a commissary for a food truck in Georgia as well? Yes, you actually do. So welcome to Food Truck Freaks. In this podcast, we will also upload this onto our YouTube channel, but check us out on our podcast as well. You can listen to us on the go. This is all about food truck entrepreneurship and helping you understand how to get a food truck business up and running. Definitely hit the subscribe button. We have a brand new channel. We actually are not brand new to YouTube though. We have multiple channels on food entrepreneurship. You can also find those links down below this video in the description. So let's jump into this. What do I need to start a food truck in Georgia specifically? So we're gonna go through the handful of permits and licenses and then answer the commissary question, which you, by the way, need to as well. Yes. Number one, special event permit. So during the course of an event, you may be granted a special event permit as it's known, commonly known as a quote unquote vending permit. Okay, so this is gonna be a permit set up specifically for the special event that you're attending or the one that you're going to, which permits you to sell food at a specific venue location for the length of that event. Okay, so most athletic centers, or festivals or concerts, large venues like that, will have an event planner who can provide you with information on the sorts of permits required to sell food on the site of that specific event. So keep that in mind, as well as how long those permits must be in effect for. Normally, those permits will be specifically for that event. If it's 3 days, 4 days, or 5 days, that's something you need to check into. But you will need to have a special events permit for your food truck business in Georgia. For this reason, if you're going to cater a wedding with your food truck, you'll want to inquire with the venue planner about the permits that will be required for weddings as well. Number two, standard operating procedures. So you'll need to have one of these set up. Food operators are required to present them with a standard operating procedure paper before they can actually begin serving the general public in a few places. This is an unusual requirement, but definitely something that definitely will occur occasionally when you go to different cities and different counties. So when doing operations on your vehicle, this document should detail the steps you and your personnel must take. You'll also need a comprehensive step-by-step list of the outline, how each dish should be prepared, how your equipment should be cleaned and sterilized, and how your truck should be locked up at the end of the day, which, by the way, should be at a commissary kitchen. In the state of Georgia, when you start a food truck business, you will have a designated commissary kitchen. Okay, that can sometimes incur about $800 to $1,200 a month, depending on the location, but you do have to have a commissary kitchen in Georgia for your food truck. It's specific designated with an address as well. Some food truck operators include a copy of these specific materials in the training manual as a reference for their employees. Okay, so if you're hiring employees, make sure they have some type of a standard operating procedure that they can look at. Number three, commissary letter of agreement. So it is possible that the city may require you to keep your supplies and prepare your meals in a commissary kitchen, which they do in Georgia, but check specifically with the city kitchen before driving around your food truck during the day, selling your products and your food items, okay? Then you may also be required as a commissary letter agreement, which is a written document between you and the specific commissary proprietor, the owner of that business, verifying that you have access to the facility and identifying the services that you'll be entitled to use while you are there. So keep that in mind. There's a specific set of services each commissary kitchen will allow you to use. Cooking space, fresh water, garbage collection, food storage, and such are basically the norms when it comes to the types of amenities commissary kitchens will allow you to have. Number four, so parking permits. So in order to determine whether parking permits are required in places where you want to sell your food, you need to contact your local county clerk's office to find out what necessary permits may be needed to park. Believe it or not, yes, you will actually have to have permits in order to park in certain areas. Now keep that in mind. Some streets may be completely off limits to food trucks, while others may only allow them on certain days at a certain time. That's also something that could pop up within that city. That's why it's a little tricky. Every city is quite different in what they, as far as ordinances and regulations, so keep this in mind. Several other towns have set aside specific days and food trucks in order to prevent traffic congestion as well. That's something that may happen during holidays and things, so be aware of that. In the event that you need to park your truck during business hours, your parking permit will specify the location and the time once you get that from the city, okay? So the sign will also tell you whether or not you may park your vehicle on the street overnight or whether or not it must be kept in a garage or, of course, at a commissary kitchen. Number 5, fire certificate. So you may actually need a fire certificate as well. The county or the city may want to look at the truck for purposes, the fire department, of course, will do that inspection just to make sure that there's no, you may have a couple fire extinguishers that you may have to have on hand. If you're running propane or some type of gas through certain cooking equipment also on the truck, that may be necessary as well. So if you want to operate a food truck in some counties in Georgia, you need to have it examined by not just the health inspector, but also the fire inspector. So if you have a culinary equipment or gas lines on the vehicle, this will all most likely as well be essential in most circumstances, but a fire inspection will likely not be required if you solely sell chilled foods. It doesn't have any type of potential explosive equipment or something that could, obviously erupt in fire. But it is important to double check with your local authorities just to be safe, okay? In addition, the fire department will inspect your cooking equipment to ensure that it's properly installed and it's functioning correctly. So they may turn things on, turn things off, check your lines and be aware of that as well. Also, electrical wiring as well. That's something that may come up as well, okay? So keep that in mind. All right, so number 6, to operate a food truck business in Georgia, make sure you check on your seller's permits, okay? So when food service business owners purchase materials and supplies at wholesale pricing, a seller's permit will be something that will be, most jurisdictions, most counties and cities will require that, but that allows you to buy it without having to pay sales tax. Okay, so the tax would be collected basically when the goods is sold to the customers, preventing the item from being taxed more than once. So ingredients, for instance, packaging, whatever it may be that you're buying to create that final product, you only collect sales tax when you sell the product to the customer. Check Georgia State's Department of Commerce website to determine whether the seller's permit is actually required in your state and how to obtain one, okay? So let's go through number 7. Number 7 is health department permit. Okay, so the health department, often known as a food service license, is granted to you by the health department in the city or county that you're in, and it confirms that your vehicle has passed the health county inspection process, okay? During the inspection, an agent from the Department of Health will look at any health code violations in your vehicle or present you with some suggestions or corrections if you happen to have any checks that need to be looked at, okay? If it's not something that passes. They look for things like appropriate food storage, hygiene, if you've got one of those HACCP protocols, definitely want to get one of those together. That's basically covering the process from your truck on how to clean it, keep it clean, storing food, keeping products at the right temperature. There's a lot to those protocols, but those are fantastic and they normally are actually required to be in place when you have it. So each state and city will have its own set of permissions for food truck entrepreneurs. Will need to also get before they can begin to operate the business. Large cities, by the way, like Atlanta, let's say in Georgia, cities usually have well-defined lists of permissions that are required for food trucks operating in their jurisdiction. So if you operate in a smaller town, on the other hand, you may find that it's a little bit more difficult to get information needed because they may not specifically have information set up for you. Some of the outskirt towns outside of Georgia and such, okay? Now, a permit from the health department might cost you anywhere, this will range, and I know it's kind of a big range, but it'll range between $50 to up to even $1,000, depending on the municipality. Every city and county will be slightly different, so you want to check with them on the pricing, but normally it's not very expensive to have those types of permits. And you got to be aware they're renewed every single year, okay? Next up, food handler's permit. So now it's also possible that you're going to need to obtain what's known as a food handler's permit to get your food truck up and running in Georgia, sometimes known as a food handler's license or food management certificate, okay? So after you successfully complete the food handler training and the food safety course in most states, just the manager on duty is necessary to get this specific license or permission to do that. Therefore, this is not a huge problem for people to get. If a food is handled, prepared, cooked, or kept on the premises, other states require that one or more employees have a valid permit at all times. So that means if you're the owner and operator of the food truck, you have to have that permit handler. And in some cases, if you have an employee with you, they too need to have that certification showing, or they need to have their card visible. So if they're ever asked or if it's inspected, they got to have that on hand. Permits for food handlers are normally less than about $50 and they're good for about 5 years. I think it's 3 to 5 years, depending on the state. Cities will often demand the majority, if not all, of the staff on the food truck have some type of food handler certificate, so keep that in mind. And that's also an expense you can incur and also write off as a tax expense as well. Food handlers permits can be obtained through what's known as ServSafe website. ServSafe is a nationwide recognized certification program, and you can definitely get it through them, and I believe it's actually done online if I'm not mistaken. So these are some permits and some licenses that you would need. There's a couple more, and we're going to wrap this up for you. If you're looking to figure out what do I need for this start a food truck in Georgia, these last three are very simple. It's going to be a valid driver's license. So basically, of course, to operate your food truck, you will need to have a valid state Georgia license as well, okay? And as I'll also need to register your truck with that, just as you would if you were driving a vehicle, okay? That's kind of a no-brainer, but in most states, a basic driver's license will serve this requirement and you'll be perfectly fine. Other states, though, on hand, will utilize the weight and length of the vehicle to decide whether or not you're required to obtain what's known as a commercial truck license, okay? Next up is identification number for your employment. So this is an EIN, employer identification number. This is for IRS purposes. So an employer identification number, often known as a social security number or an EIN, is a federal tax identification number that is used to register your food truck with the Internal Revenue Service, okay? It gives you the ability to kind of register a bank account, establish credit history, get a credit loan, or even get loans. You need to have the EIN for the business. And even when you hire personnel, you hire employees, some states provide this actually with your company license. Now, by the way, you can check out down below this video, you can incorporate and create your food truck LLC in Georgia. Actually, down below, check out the Inc. File and Inc. Authority links. You can get an EIN absolutely for free when you do that. So just check that out, that may help you out. Lastly, a business license. Of course, if you're gonna operate a food truck business in Georgia, you need to have a business license, which is also referred to as a vendor license or a basic business operation license. Permits you conduct business in a city. It allows you to also perform a business within the state that you're in, which would be Georgia. So make sure you get a business license. That's, again, kind of a no-brainer, but something you need to be aware of, you need to have. A food truck business license can cost basically between about $75 to $600. It varies depending on the location, but the application fees and restrictions will vary based on where you live in the country. So Georgia may have specific setup for that as well. Make certain that you are aware when your license expires and how to renew it. Normally, this is an annual renewal license. Be sure to apply as soon as possible, of course, before it expires, because you don't want to be operating, a couple of weeks or a few weeks after an expiration of a business license. Unlicensed food operators get fines, so you don't want to be one of those. So for more information specifically about that business type of license, you can check your state's website as well, Georgia State's website, in regards to renewing your business license. So these are some of the things you need to be aware of. And when you're asking yourself, what do I need to start a food truck in Georgia? These are some super important things. If you have any more questions about how to start a food truck business, let us know down in the comments and we'll definitely get to it. And if you know anyone who is getting into food truck business, let them know about Food Truck Freaks. We are going to have a ton of videos here on our YouTube channel about the food truck industry and the food truck business. So I'll see you guys on our next video.